Welcome back, folks, to the very first build with my Bosch GTS1510 table saw. And as I promised, the very first thing that we're going to build with this bad boy are those studio monitors. Now before we get to cutting, let's take a quick look at the simple design. It's a basic rectangle box, 9 front, 12 deep, and 16 high. Nothing spectacular about this box at all. What's interesting about the box is the speakers themselves. These are the JBL 629s. Now what's so special about these JBL 629s? Well, they're special because they're car speakers. They were never meant to be studio monitors. Even though they sound fantastic and absolutely beautiful in the car, they were never meant to be studio monitors. While JBL is one of the best companies out there for music and sound equipment, when they make something for a car, they mean it's meant for a car. It was never meant for your studio. However, in order to build proper speakers and boxes, you need to know the volume enclosure recommendation. So basically how big to make the box for the speaker. Because these are car speakers, JBL didn't exactly advertise this data because they can't determine the size of a car. They can't tell you what the size of your car is, so they didn't advertise it. However, that information can be acquired. You just have to go to JBL's website and poke around. And by poking around, I mean you pull up your model and you go to the specs, and somewhere around the bottom of the page, if you don't directly see something that says speaker recommended volume enclosure, you will see either the manual or you will see a spec sheet that you can click on. In this case, I have both. Once you click on the spec sheet, it will take you some good information like this, and you get all the data about your speaker, your wattage, your frequency response, all that jazz, but that's not what we're looking for. However, the manual in this case happened to have that data. Now if I scroll down a little bit, you will see something called a VAS. That is what I'm going to use to get my recommended enclosure volume. What is a VAS? It's basically the volume airflow equivalent that the speaker operates best under. And in my case, it says it's 12.86. Now that's 12.86 liters. And that's cool because I can work with that as well. So now that I have my volume requirement, which is 12.86, I go over to my speaker box building software, which is in this case the Omni calculator, which is pretty simple. It's clean, gives me all the data I need without any fuss. However, it's looking for, well, not looking for, it's going to give me in cubic inches. Well, no biggie. It's the 21st century, ladies and gentlemen. Just pick your favorite search engine, plug in the data, and get the equivalent from 1286 liters to cubic inches. And in this case, I just picked the first choice, and it tells me 12.86 liters is roughly 785 cubic inches. Awesome. Now that's per speaker, so now we have some data that we can target. So now that I have my data, I can now go back to my calculator software, which is Omni Calculator, and I can start plugging in some numbers. Now if you think these numbers are random, they're not. These are some dimensions off of a Mackie Studio monitor I once had, and it gives me a nice starting point that I can use. Now you have to enter the thickness of the wood that you're using, which in my case is MDF. It's 3/4 inch MDF. The decimal, of course, is 0.75. Now my final enclosure volume is 1141.9, or roughly 1142, just rounded up for nice. You might be thinking, hey, that's a lot larger than 785. I know. You gotta realize this is for 2 speakers, not 1. Now, why don't I just double it? Because that would be too big. In my personal experience, that is just too big. So what I have learned over years is just to multiply it by 1.5. So essentially you take the first volume of the first speaker and you cut it in half, and then you just add back to it, or save yourself the trouble and just multiply it by 1.5. You multiply 785 by 1.5, you get 1177.5. Now that's a smidgen higher, but it's okay because it's somewhere in the neighborhood, so it's good enough. As long as it's not double, it's fine, because you don't want to have too much volume room. Okay, that is also a problem. Having too much, having too little is also a problem. So what I've found, and like I said, this is from experience and this works for me, is to multiply by 1.5. So take the volume of that first speaker and multiply it by 1.5 if you're going to use dual woofers in the same enclosure. That has worked for me for years. It is awesome. For you mathematicians out there that's scratching your head and wondering, I'm pretty sure you're going to come up with some cool information. I'll happily look at it, but I promise you I'm going to keep going with this number because it's been working out for me. Also, I know these numbers work because I currently have the box at the same exact size and they sound fantastic. So, no reason to change a winning formula, right? So just again, multiply the woofer by 1.5 and you get a total enclosure for the dual woofer if they're the same woofers in the same box. So now that I have my volume information, I do my math and I go down to Lowe's, get myself a sheet of MDF, and I ask the guys at Lowe's to pre-cut that for me a little bit. However, sometimes their cuts are a little bit off and need to be trimmed up, and that's kind of what happened here. I had to do a little bit of trimming up to get it looking all pretty again, but that's okay. I have a cool table saw. Pieces have to be cut accurately, especially since I plan to do a 45-degree edge-to-edge cut. Everything has to be spot on perfect. So this is a point where you don't rush. You're not supposed to rush through any of this anyway, but this is that time where you really slow down and make sure that your numbers work. And I know I have the state-of-the-art saw, I know I have a cool saw, but I still eyeball it just to, give that final look to make sure everything is spot on. Yes, I eyeballed it every single time before I made a cut. I just didn't show you that part in the video. Safety warning. Every time you cut, you're supposed to move the debris. I've been cutting and cutting and cutting. I've let the debris accumulate. That's bad. That's a safety violation. Any one of these pieces could get caught in the blade and get shot out the back like a ballistic missile and hit you. please clear your debris and keep your workspace clear, otherwise you can run a risk of injury. So now that we're done cutting all our pieces, it's time to assemble a box. And in this method, I'm going to show you how to use tape versus clamps. It is not a cheap method or an alternative method if you just don't have the tools. This is just a different way of putting it together. Now you'll see me use duct tape in this, but please don't use duct tape because you're going to pay for it later when the duct tape's time to come off. So use painter's tape, but I had duct tape on hand. I'm like, let's show you this method too because I like it. I've used it before. So the idea here is to put duct tape on the underside of the wood, stick it on just ahead of time so you can put the wood together. The idea is to assemble it here like a puzzle, putting the box together, but don't do it all at once. Now if you have a large area, you can spread out the entire box and put all 6 pieces down at once, but as you can clearly see, I'm using the top of my Boss GTS box as a makeshift because I don't have a table in my garage and I didn't want to put it on my truck, so I'm just using the box right now. So as you clearly see me doing, I fasten both ends together, I put them like as close together as possible, lined up nicely. Here I'm giving you a close-up shot just to show you. Keep the edge pretty much lined up as close together as you can get them without overlapping, because it has to be a neat clean, because when you put the glue down, it has to close into a nice shell, nice and tight and well fit together. The whole time you're doing this, you have to make sure that everything remains square. And by square I mean I've done a 90-degree angle on it so that it comes together nicely and cleanly. Put some more tape down ahead of time to prep for it. As you can see, I'm clearly putting the other side down so that it will have a nice support. Do not be stingy here with the glue. Gob it up, glue it up, put a lot of glue on there. More is better, okay? More is better. Now, as you put it on, constantly check to make sure that it stays square, okay? Just constantly check. Move that tool around and just check constantly. You can't check enough, and you can't put enough tape, and you can't put enough glue. Okay, so more glue, more tape, and more square the whole time you're putting it together. If I didn't make that perfectly clear, please constantly check for square as you go along. Tape, secure, don't be stingy with the glue, okay? Secure, tape, secure, check for square, adjust as needed, and keep it rolling. Don't stop checking for square the entire time. Now when you're finished, or close to being finished, oops, dropped my square there for a second. Check again, okay? This is that time to double check your work, make sure that everything's squared up. You want to do this before the glue dries, so you have time to shift around, make little shifts and changes. I mean, you're checking as you go along, so it should be square the entire way, but just in case it goes out of alignment by a little here and there, because a little makes a lot, because this thing was cut precisely at 45 at all edges, so you have to make sure that it's spot on. Adjust as needed and do a test fit before you put on that last piece. of truth to see if all that taping and gluing comes together is when you put that front piece on and there's no gaps, everything is laid down perfectly. If it's on there like it's supposed to, it should give you a little trouble to come off, and that's a good sign. That's a good sign. Time to mark out your front cutouts for your woofer. You want to make sure that everything's dead center. So in this case, I know it's 16 inches. So just by habit, I just mark the center. I always do that. And then put one at 4 and one at 12. And I had a oopsie. No biggie. No sharpener, no problem. Just grab your X-Acto knife and very carefully just peel back little pieces at a time to expose, I want to say lead, but it's not lead. Nothing's lead anymore. Whatever the pencil thing in the center is now called. Just take your time, no rush, just peel it back. If you don't have a sharpener is ideal obviously, but if you don't have one, just use your X-Acto knife and just peel back those little bits, and there you go. All of a sudden, ta-da, you have a pencil again. So mark your center. That's where you're going to put your drill and mark your hole. So I'm going to stop the video here. The proper way to do this, ladies and gentlemen, is to take a center punch or a hole starter and just kind of tap that part you marked as a center, and then use a smaller drill to drill a pilot hole, if you will, before you take the big thing through it. Me and this drill have been doing business for a long time, so I felt very comfortable doing this. I'm okay doing this. This is me. Don't follow my example here. Do it the proper way. Okay, do it the proper way. I'm just really comfortable with this drill, and I've done this before, so yeah, bad habits, I guess. One of the downsides of using a hole cutting saw like this is that you have to put a little extra effort into it. You probably have to rock it back a little bit, may have to pulse down a little bit. I mean, it's cutting into MDF. It's a very condensed piece of wood, so you have to, no matter how sharp your blade is, you're going to have to put some work into it. So if it doesn't just cut into it really quickly, it's okay, it's expected. And it's easier to just flip the board over and cut from both sides, and it gets through the hole quicker with less stress on this blade. But when you're done, and if the MDF is stuck into it, do not put your hands on that blade. It's going to be hot from all that friction. So, just keep that in mind. Strange but true, believe it or not, I actually started cutting some 2x4 up to make braces for my studio monitor, as if 6.5 inch speakers could actually vibrate a 3/4 inch MDF. I know, right? But my brain kicked in, so I didn't bother. But here footage of those cuts, just to watch the saw cut some board. So we're finally done for the day. Now this will be a two-part video, so in the second part I will put the speaker together, sand it, and you'll see whether or not I go with a paint or a wrap for the final look.